what advice would you give to veterans and their families who are applying for this program for the first time?
I would probably give the same advice I give a lot of my veteran clients, which is don't minimize. I know it's really hard for people. People are very proud, but you have to be honest about the symptoms and the issues and the support you're getting. Because one of the things it does say is with the continuous care, if you need the care some of the time, that doesn't count. So it has to be something you always need help with. Do not try and pretend that you are healthier than you are, because I know it's hard to admit to strangers that you're not doing great and like your wife's tying your shoes. I get it. I totally get it. But your wife will kill you if she does not get the support she needs because you said you can tie your own shoes. So don't do that. So the other thing, of course, is as much documentation as you can get, especially if you have records from private sources. So like the VA medical facilities know where their own records are, mostly. I have to say mostly. I've had them lose things. But if you have private medical records that need to be submitted for consideration, make sure that those are in your medical records with VA.
Welcome to the Victory Over VA podcast, a podcast about empowering veterans to overcome denied disability claims. Each week, we deliver critical insights to help you understand the disability process, veterans' benefits, and how to take control of your legal rights. Now here's your host, Tony Francis Jackson.
So welcome to Victory Over VA, your guide to unlocking your veterans' disability benefits. If you're a veteran applying for benefits, be sure to subscribe for the latest developments in VA disability. I'm Francis Jackson, and this is Alexandra Jackson, and we're from the firm of Jackson and MacNichol, where we specialize in helping veterans to get justice on their veterans' disability benefits. So welcome to our podcast, and let's talk about who this show is for. Obviously, this is for veterans, but it's also for friends of veterans, relatives of veterans, and just anyone in the community who wants to support their veterans and see that they get a fair shake when it comes to getting the veterans' disability benefits they deserve. So today, we're going to talk about the VA Caregiver program. And I'd like to start by asking Alex, can you explain what the VA Caregiver Support Program is and what its main purpose is?
So this one is a little unusual for our topics because it's done through the VHA, the Veterans Health Administration, rather than the VBA, the Veterans Benefits Administration. And as I understand it, the original purpose of this was to support post 9/11 vets who came back with serious, it just says kind of serious injury, but they include in that head injuries, which of course very common if you got explosives about, and also serious mental health issues. And they include things that kind of neurological problems or something that needs serious supervision. So like if you had a memory problem because of a TBI, for example. So you can function, but somebody's got to be kind of watching you every step. That's kind of what they were targeting. It seems like it was a really very kind of TBI and like, amputee sort of focused when they were talking about serious injury. But it's kind of generic.
Yeah, so what are the eligibility criteria for veterans and their caregivers now to participate in this program?
So VA still has specific allowances for people with severe neurological issues and for people who need that sort of supervision due to like a memory loss sort of issue. Mm-hmm. But the term is just, it has to be a serious injury. And so what they're normally using for that is you've got service connection at 70% overall.
Okay.
If you have one thing at 70, great, but just kind of generically, it seems like 70% service connection will do it. But you also have to need care continuously for at least a 6-month period for what's called in this and some other fields, this is much more of a healthcare term, the activities of daily living. So, showering, getting dressed, personal care and grooming, which would be like doing your hair, shaving, eating, going to the bathroom. They have a very specific one about adjusting prosthetics that somebody without this disability would be able to adjust on their own.
Mhm.
But generally that, and mobility stuff. Can you get out of bed? Can you get in and out of chairs? That sort of thing.
Okay. So what types of benefits and support does the Caregiver program provide for caregivers?
So the Caregiver program has two different levels, and I will absolutely butcher the 6-letter acronyms because they don't spell anything. So I'm not going to do that. But they reduced it down from 3 tiers to 2, and it's kind of on the severity of stuff. But basically, they'll train you as a caregiver.
Okay.
So they'll teach you about caregiving. They've got specific training for your mental health, and they've also got potentially eligibility for healthcare for the caregiver, as well as some travel reimbursement, respite care, which is really big, potentially up to 30 days a year, and stipend, depending on which level of the program you're in, the stipend is different.
Mhm.
But like literally they'll pay you to be the caregiver for your vet. So pretty good, all things considered, as a program.
So how does this current expansion of the program differ from the way it was originally set up?
It was strictly post 9/11 vets when it started, and they expanded it in 2020 and then in 2022, and it now covers all vets, which is excellent.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay. So what role does the Veterans Service Connection and their disability rating play in determining eligibility?
It's a threshold. You've got to have at least that 70% service connection, or alternatively, you have to have a very specific injury like a TBI or something else that's service related for you to be eligible to get a caregiver, basically.
Okay. And how does the VA define a primary family caregiver?
Well, they have two definitions, which I find really funny. And one is basically all of the immediate family members, which to include step family, which I think is very nice and generous. And the other definition is anybody who lives full time with the veteran. So I don't know why they bothered to distinguish that. But yeah, it can be basically anybody if they're willing to be the full-time caregiver and live with the veteran to do so.
So essentially, you have to be either family or living with the veteran.
Correct, yes. This can't be somebody who goes home at the end of the day to somewhere else and is a non-family member. If they're covered by, the other thing about this program is the caregivers intended to be providing services that no other medical service or service is covering. So if somebody is already coming to the house to do, all the mobility stuff, like a visiting nurse, etc., maybe you qualify and maybe you don't. It depends on if you're doing like the night shift or something. But for the most part, this is intended as kind of like a replacement for a healthcare worker so that they could expand, because it's for two reasons, right? One is we do not have enough healthcare workers for everybody to get the level of care and service that they need.
Right.
People who are really invested in doing that, usually family, maybe friends, people who are already supporting the veteran.
Yep.
Second, it's so the people who are already doing this work can get paid for it and can continue to support the veteran in the appropriate way without them having to try and place them, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So
So what
idea.
Yeah, what advice would you give to veterans and their families who are applying for this program for the first time?
I would probably give the same advice I give a lot of my veteran clients, which is don't minimize. I know it's really hard for people. People are very proud, but you have to be honest about the symptoms and the issues and the support you're getting. Because one of the things it does say is with the continuous care, if you need the care some of the time, that doesn't count. So it has to be something you always need help with. Do not try and pretend that you are healthier than you are, because I know it's hard to admit to strangers that you're not doing great and like your wife's tying your shoes. I get it. I totally get it. But your wife will kill you if she does not get the support she needs because you said you can tie your own shoes. So don't do that. So The other thing, of course, is as much documentation as you can get, especially if you have records from private sources. So like the VA medical facilities know where their own records are mostly. I have to say mostly. I've had them lose things. But if you have private medical records that need to be submitted for consideration, make sure that those are in your medical records with VA.
And what are some of the common mistakes that families make during the application process? It sounds like getting outside records, for example, might be one of the things that gets overlooked.
Not giving complete information, not being detailed enough in paperwork, those are the things that I frequently hear are an issue. So, if the question asks, can you tie your shoes? And you write yes instead of only if somebody lifts my leg up and crosses it across my knee,
Yeah.
it's the correct answer because you can, but you haven't qualified it enough. So, and also just, I know VA paperwork can be really long. I know it can be really complicated. You have to sit down and answer everything to the best of your ability. Again, if you don't know the answer, I'd probably put that, frankly. I think it's better if they're like, when did disability start? And you say 2005 to 2006 because it's, Agent Orange prostate cancer or something. And your medical records say it was somewhere in that period, great. But you don't have to break out like February 18th, 2005 if you don't know that date.
Got it. So what kinds of financial support or stipends are available for caregivers through this program?
So it's really interesting. They pay you at a government rate, basically, as like a government employee rate based on where you live. And the lower one is about 60% of, I think it's a GS4. So the government has these pay scale rankings and they go from 1 to I don't even know what. But GS4 would be on the lower end, but they will pay you about 60% of that for kind of the lower level of healthcare need tier, and they'll pay you 100% of that for the higher level. So you'd be making, what kind of a lower ranking government worker would make, which is better than a sharp stick in the eye, as Al MacNichol used to say.
Absolutely. And can you comment on healthcare benefits that caregivers might be eligible for?
So the Caregiver program is really geared towards mental health support of caregivers. I would frankly include the respite care in that. I know it's not what we traditionally think of as healthcare, but up to 30 days a year of respite care is really good.
Yeah, that's a big
that's
deal.
a full month. Like, most people don't get a month's paid vacation from their job, right? So that's basically, you get to go for that period and somebody else will cover your veteran. They also are potentially eligible for CHAMP VA healthcare benefits through the program, which again is huge if you are caretaking for somebody else, to be able to just get your own medical treatment dealt with at a lower free cost is really important.
It sounds like the effect here would be to allow someone to stay home and take care of the veteran
Yeah.
instead of going to work and earning and getting health care. That would be the alternative they would have to make absent these benefits.
Basically, like this, it doesn't do it on paper, but in effect, it kind of makes you just like a low-level government worker so that you can care full-time for the vet, especially if you're already doing it, without having to work a job in order to keep food on the table. You at least get the money from the caregiver program to try and support you and the veteran. That's really the best comparison, is they've made you like a little low-level government employee, and that includes, benefits.
And this would be in addition to the veteran's disability compensation, correct?
Correct. This is payment to the caregiver specifically. This is not, the veteran gets their own service-connected disability payment. This is payment for the caregiver so that they don't have to work that full-time job like you were saying.
So what options are available if someone applies to be the caregiver and the VA turns them down?
You can appeal. The appeal is within the VHA, so it's a little different than like the VBA. It goes specifically through their systems, but as with anything else in the veterans world, you just appeal it, right?
And ultimately, if you're not satisfied with the result in VHA, you can go to the Board of Veterans Appeals and then the court.
Just like in VA, yeah. It's just they kind of funnel shockingly into the same place.
Okay.
My understanding was, at least for a while, there were pretty high initial denial rates. So a lot of people were having to appeal. They hadn't worked out the system yet. So they did have to create the appeal system, but there is one now.
Okay. So what should caregivers know about maintaining eligibility and complying with program requirements in order to keep going in the program?
So you've got to do all of the trainings, right? That's really the big one. They love their acronyms, right? There's SAVE, which actually has 2 E's. I mean, they didn't write SAVE with 2 E's, but if you have the acronym listed out, it's got an S, A, V, and 2 E's in it. So they've got trainings like that, which you have to complete for the program. There is monitoring. Obviously, you can't abuse your veteran. That makes you ineligible. Shocker. So basically, you have to do a good job at your job. You have to do all of the trainings. As long as you, and any sort of, compliance check-ins, you have to respond to appropriately. But as I understand it, it's a fairly straightforward, well, it's not straightforward. That's a lie. It's VA. But it's not anything you wouldn't be expected to do.
Okay. So it sounds like the recent legislation has really expanded this program.
Vastly expanded it. It went from only post 9/11 vets to all vets in a period of, 2 years. Because the program started like 2010, and they did the first expansion 2020 and the second one 2022. So they took this like 10-year-old program, in 2 years they just kind of blew it up to cover everybody. That's huge. Post 9/11 vets, all vets.
No, that is
much bigger pool.
That is huge. I mean, there are millions of folks at the 70% level.
Yeah.
And that is huge.
Like that's astronomical increase.
Okay, one last question. What rights and protections do caregivers have under the VA program, and what legal advice would you offer them? I know it's a compound question, but take your best shot.
So, rights and protections and advice.
Yep.
What advice do you offer healthcare workers? I mean, basically, you're laughing, but I think that's kind of about it. Like, this is, I know a lot of people who are already caregiving for veterans without any hope of reward or expectation thereof already take it seriously. But consider yourself basically, take the stipend and the benefits and all of that, and consider yourself essentially a government worker. You aren't actually, you don't have those sort of things, but think of it the same way you'd think of any other full-time job. You got to comply with everything that they ask you to do. Don't get too defensive, I guess I would say, about what you think the care should be versus what's being prescribed. Be a little careful there, because I think if you're quote-unquote non-compliant, that can be an issue. But just treat it like a job, and with the seriousness that you would give a job. And I think that will do you in good stead.
Okay. So going back to the rights and protections part, basically you have the right to appeal anytime there's a denial, correct?
Anytime there's a denial, anytime there's a removal. I mean, it's just like being in any other VA system, right? So they turn you down, you can appeal. If they try and remove you from the program, you can appeal. There's no more and no less. You're not actually a government employee, so you don't have those sort of protections. You have essentially what a veteran would have in the VBA system.
Good.
Very equivalent.
Well, that's all the time we have this morning. So thank you very much for going over those details. And folks, we appreciate you tuning in to this episode of our podcast. And we hope you'll share this with anyone you know who is concerned about their veterans.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Victory Over VA podcast. Make sure to visit our website, veteransbenefits.com/podcast, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, If you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you like this show, you might want to check out our free consultation to see how we can help you with your denied claim. Simply go to veteransbenefits.com and fill out the form. You fought for us. Now let us fight for you. And be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.